So welcome back to HCC's Afterschool program. Today we're going to be making a Father's Day pop-up card. This is the one we're going to be making, and when you open it up, it pops up and it reveals whatever message you want. For me, I wrote pop inside, but you can write any message and decorate it as much as you want. So now let's get started. For this activity, we're going to be needing a ruler, scissors, markers of your choice or crayons or colored pencils, a glue stick or liquid glue, and colored paper. It could be construction paper, cardstock, and you can choose up to 4 colors. So let's get started. For today's activity, we're going to be taking a piece of cardstock paper, and this is going to be the very base of our card. And we're going to fold it in half. So now what we have to add is the border. So as we can see in this card, it has a blue border that makes up the suit. So you can choose any color for it. For me, I'm going to choose a turquoise. I'm going to take my first piece. I'm going to fold it in half. After folding it in half, we're going to cut it. And now what we want to do is measure it to make sure it's 5 by 8. This piece of paper isn't 5 by 8, so I'm going to trim it a bit just to make it 5 by 8. To measure out 5 inches and 8 inches. So now let me zoom in. As you can see, it's 5 inches by 8 inches. So now I'm gonna cut it out. And now let's see how it looks. So as we see, the reason we made it 5 by 8 is so that you could see the white, and you could see a small border and line of white all around it. For our next part, we want to make these creases that we see here. So how are we going to do that? We're going to make a line down the middle, and we're going to find the in-between. The in-between of 5 is 2.5. So as you can see, I made a line down the middle, but not completely down. There's 2.5 here and 2.5 inches here. And then I made it 2.5 inches down. So now I'm gonna cut that part. The square doesn't have to be a specific dimension. So now we can glue it onto the piece of paper. To mention this part of the suit. You can make it a square, or you can make it like I did. For me, I made a pentagon, a backwards pentagon. Tiny white strip. So for me, my pentagon is 1 inch. So I'm gonna make sure that when I'm drawing it, that it's also 1 inch. So now I have my tiny white strip and I'm gonna put this on the side. The final part is we want to make this tiny red strip, and this tiny red strip is a red triangle. Although for me, I'm gonna switch it up, and instead of making it a red triangle, I'm gonna make it a gold triangle. And make sure that the triangle and the rectangle and the pentagon, that they're all the same length. So for my triangle, the length is 1. Meaning for the pentagon, the length is also going to be 1. And for the tiny rectangle, the length is also 1. So now I have my tiny yellow triangle. So now we can glue all the pieces together. But before we even do that, we want to start by drawing a line down the middle, okay? So we're going to draw a line down the middle. And now for this next part, we can actually use buttons if we have buttons, and we can actually glue them onto the card. For my case, I don't have any buttons, so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna draw in the buttons. You can draw in as many buttons as you want to, but try to make it so that there's an equal spacing between each button. So I drew in my buttons, and now we can go back to that pocket that we were making. So let's take the triangle, rectangle, and pentagon that we have, and let's start gluing it together. So first we're gonna start with the pentagon. So I'm gonna glue it on. So now we're gonna go to our rectangle. For our rectangle, what we're gonna do is we can glue it on top of the pentagon, or we can glue it above the pentagon. So for me, I'm gonna glue it on top of the pentagon. This. Now from here, it comes, we use the triangle, and now the triangle, we glue it on top. So now as we can see, our card is coming together. For the bow tie, we can actually make it as big as we want or as tiny as we want. Though in case you want specific dimensions for my specific bow tie, I'm gonna make it 3 inches by 1 inch. So now I'm gonna fold this rectangle in half. And then I'm gonna fold it in half again. Now from here, we're gonna draw the shape of the bow tie. So the shape of the bow tie should look like this. And now I'm gonna cut it out. And I'm gonna open it up. And I should be left with this shape. Our next step, we're gonna put this to the side. We're gonna grab that gold piece of paper that we have. And we're gonna make another rectangle. But this rectangle is going to be much smaller. 1/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. And then proceeding cutting your rectangle. So now for our next step, we're gonna go back to that bow tie that we made. And as we can see, it's the shape of the bow tie that we have. We're gonna fold one part of it in. We're gonna fold the other part of it in. And then for the next step, we're gonna grab this tiny rectangle and we're gonna wrap it around. So we should be left with this. Now let's go back to our card. And now let's glue on the bow tie onto the card. So now as we can see, we have a nice bow tie on the card. We're gonna move on to the interior of our card. And for the interior of our card, we're gonna make flaps, okay? So these flaps look like a fan. And we're gonna take our 2 pieces of colored paper. In this case, I chose turquoise, though you can choose any color you want. You're gonna fold the 2 pieces of paper in half, like this. Then you're gonna fold it in half again. Then you're gonna open it up, and you should be left with 4 flaps. From here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna divide. We see that we are left with 4 rectangles. The next step is to divide each rectangle into smaller rectangles. So the way we're gonna do it is by we're gonna divide it. We're gonna fold 1/3 of the way in. Then we're gonna flip it around and fold it back. Then we're gonna flip it around and fold it back. Now this step is very similar to making a fan. We're gonna keep folding it. And once we finish, we should be left with this. A bunch of tiny rectangles that go up and down. We're gonna do the same thing with our other piece of paper. From here, our next step is to fold this in half. And we should be left with this shape. We're gonna put that aside. And we're gonna be working on the pop-up sign. For this pop-up sign, you can make whatever you want to. You can write dad, pop, grandfather. It's to whichever man is important in your life. For this one, I'm gonna use a coral type of color. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trace the letters out of the word that I want to write. So I'm gonna trace out dad. So now that we have our letters, let's move this aside. So for this next part, we're gonna be making the pop-up parts. For the pop-up parts, we're gonna be making tiny rectangles that are used to make a pop-up. In order to do this, we're gonna be making rectangles that are 1/4 of an inch by 3 inches. And the number of rectangles that we're gonna make depends on the amount of letters that are in the word that we choose. So for example, that is made up of 3 letters. So I'm gonna make 3 rectangles. Each rectangle is going to be 1/4 of an inch by 3 inches. So now I have 3 rectangles. For the next part, we're going to fold each rectangle in half. Then from here, after we have folded each rectangle in half, we want to fold just a bit more in. So we're left like this. So the rectangle should look like this. We grab the rectangle, we fold a bit more in, and we're gonna do that to each rectangle. For our next step, it's time to put this all together. We're gonna open our card. And it is time to add the pop-up letters. We're gonna grab our glue stick or liquid glue. And now as we can see, our pop-up sign is starting to form. For the final part, we can decorate it. We can add hearts, kisses, or whatever you want to. We can add some words for our father, for our grandfather, for that special man in our life. After we finish doing that, we're gonna add these tiny fans into the pop-up card. We're gonna add some glue. And now when we open it, our pop-up card should be done. So after we finish, we should be done with our pop-up card. And then we open it up and we see that. So thank you for joining me. It was nice seeing all of you. If you liked the video, like and subscribe. See you next time, everyone.